There's a certain silence that settles in your chest when you finally accept something you've been running from your entire life. Mine came the moment I realized this. My parents never really wanted me. Not truly. Not the way they wanted him. I was the backup plan. The invisible one. The second draft in a family that only had room for one golden child, my older brother, Eric. And the tragedy is, I spent years, decades even, trying to earn a place in their world. Trying to be enough for people who never saw me clearly, who never even tried. Growing up, it was always Eric who took up all the space in the room. He was the charming one, the funny one, the one who could get arrested for breaking a window and still be met with a boys will be boys laugh over dinner. Me? I got grounded for getting a B+ in algebra. At every school event, it was Eric's name they screamed the loudest. My wins were footnotes at best. His mistakes were phases, mine were disappointments. He wrecked a car at 18 while drunk. Dad bought him a newer one. I passed my college entrance exams with top marks. Mom forgot to even congratulate me. But the worst part? I accepted it. I internalized it. I told myself I just had to try harder. Maybe then they'd see me. So I did. I graduated early. I got a job. I stayed out of trouble. I paid my bills. I learned responsibility because no one gave me a cushion to fall back on. Eric, on the other hand, he fell constantly. And every time, they were right there to catch him. By the time we were in our 30s, our lives couldn't have been more different. Eric was a mess. An alcoholic. Jobless. Irresponsible. He had 2 kids he barely cared for, constantly in and out of his parents' house like it was some kind of revolving door rehab. Meanwhile, I was living on my own, stable, working long hours, still trying to keep a connection to the family that never really showed up for me. I'd call. I'd visit. I brought gifts on holidays. They never once visited me. And even when I sat down with them, tried to talk, tried to explain how I'd felt growing up, how left out I'd been, they just smiled politely. Told me I was too sensitive. Eric's just had it harder, honey. You've always been the strong one. But strength without love is just loneliness in disguise. And I was done pretending. So when I got the call, the one where my mom said Eric had left his kids again, I knew what was coming. I just didn't realize how low they'd go this time. Because this time, they weren't just asking for help. They were demanding I become the family's safety net. Again. But this time, I wasn't going to catch them. The call came on a gray Wednesday morning, the kind of day that already felt heavy with silence. I was halfway through reviewing reports for work when my phone buzzed. I saw my mother's name on the screen, and immediately, my stomach twisted into that familiar knot. I didn't answer right away. Because I knew. I knew this wasn't a "how are you" call. My mother never called just to hear my voice. Her calls always came with a purpose, and that purpose was almost always Eric. I picked up on the 4th ring. "Hey, Mom." "Oh, sweetheart," she began, voice trembling like she was the one being abandoned. "It's your brother. He's gone off again. We haven't seen him in 2 days. He left the kids here." I waited. She always did this, dropped the bomb and paused, like letting it hang in the air would somehow pull me in deeper. "He just dropped them off?" I asked. They were crying, confused. "He didn't even pack their things. Your father and I, we're too old for this, you know that. We just don't have the energy." There it was. The setup. And sure enough, she followed it with the line I'd come to dread more than anything else. "Can you help us out? Maybe take the kids for a little while? Just until Eric gets his head back on straight." I could have laughed, but the sadness in me was louder than any humor. My parents were asking me, the child they barely raised, to clean up the mess of the one they'd never held accountable. Eric wasn't some troubled teen anymore. He was a grown man with a pattern of destruction. This wasn't his first vanishing act. Not even his 3rd. And every time, they'd make excuses. Every time, I was the fallback plan. But now they wanted me to play dad to his kids, while they waited for their golden boy to reappear like nothing happened. "No," I said flatly. A pause. Then, almost instantly, her voice turned cold. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, Mom. I can't do it. I won't do it. These aren't my children, and this isn't my responsibility. I'm not cleaning up Eric's life anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then she scoffed. "You always were selfish." That one cut deeper than I care to admit. Not because I believed it, but because she did. She truly believed that me setting boundaries was selfishness, while enabling Eric's self-destruction was love. "I'm not selfish," I told her quietly. "I'm just tired. Tired of always being the one expected to sacrifice. Tired of being invisible unless you need something. Tired of pretending this family ever treated me equally. She hung up. No goodbye. No response. Just click. And as the silence returned to the room, I realized something heartbreaking. This wasn't just about Eric abandoning his kids. This was about my parents finally making it clear I was never the son they loved. I was just the one they used. That phone call didn't just end a conversation. It opened a floodgate. Suddenly, I was drowning in memories I'd buried so deep, I thought I'd made peace with them. Turns out, I hadn't. I'd just gotten good at pretending. Pretending I didn't notice how Christmas gifts were always uneven. Pretending it didn't sting when my parents forgot my birthday twice. Pretending I didn't hear the way my mom would gush to her friends about Eric being her miracle baby, while I was just the second one. Growing up, I had this fantasy that one day they'd wake up and see me. That if I just kept being the good one, the stable one, the reliable son, they'd come around. They never did. And now, with one simple ask, take the kids until Eric gets back, they reminded me of exactly who they were. Not people trying to protect children, not grandparents in crisis, but the same people who, time and time again, prioritized their favorite, even as he wrecked everything in his path. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, staring into the dark skyline. The cold air bit at my face, but I didn't move. My mind was stuck on one night in particular, years ago. I was 17. Eric had just crashed my car, the one I had worked 2 summers to help buy. He didn't even have a license anymore. Took it without asking, came home drunk, smashed the bumper into a tree. I remember confronting him. Finally, my voice shaking with something between rage and heartbreak. My dad stepped between us, calm but firm. He's going through a lot right now, he said. Let it go. Let it go. As if I was the one causing trouble. As if I had no right to be angry over something I had worked for. It was always like that. I was expected to let it go. To be understanding. To not make things harder for them. But now, decades later, they were asking for my help. Not out of love, but out of habit. They assumed I'd say yes, like I always did. But something had shifted in me that day. That good son inside me, he was gone. And in his place was someone older, someone more tired, but someone who finally saw the truth without flinching. I wasn't their savior. I wasn't their backup plan. I was just done. Done with the games. Done with the guilt. Done with being the son who was only called when Eric failed. And as I closed the door to my apartment that night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't go back. Not this time. Not ever. It didn't take long for the silence to break. Less than 48 hours later, my father called. I knew it would happen. It always did. After Mom's cold fury came his disappointed monologue. I answered, not because I wanted to hear him out, but because I was done running from these conversations. If they were going to guilt me again, I'd at least face it head on. Son, he started, his voice already carrying that sharp edge of disapproval. Your mother's been crying nonstop. Of course. That was the opening act. She's heartbroken. She can't understand why you're being so cruel. This isn't about Eric anymore. It's about the children. Your niece and nephew. They didn't ask for any of this. My stomach twisted. They always knew how to phrase things to make me look like the villain. As if I was punishing innocent kids. As if it wasn't Eric who dropped them like luggage. As if I was just being stubborn and ungrateful. I know they didn't ask for it, I said. But neither did I. I didn't ask to be the one you always come to when Eric screws up. I didn't ask to be the only adult in this family. His voice sharpened. Don't act like you're the only one who's had to step up. We've all sacrificed for this family. I nearly laughed. You sacrificed? You mean how you let Eric live rent-free while I paid for my own college? Or how you bailed him out of jail but refused to co-sign my first apartment lease? That kind of sacrifice. He fell silent. Because he knew I was right. But the truth has a way of making people either confront their guilt or double down. He chose the latter. If you don't want to help your own blood, he said flatly, then I guess you've made your choice. And with that, he hung up. Just like that. No discussion. No attempt to understand where I was coming from. No ounce of self-reflection. Just another dismissal. That was the moment I realized they weren't just asking for help. They were testing my loyalty. And when I didn't fold, they cut me off without hesitation. A week passed. Then 2. No messages. No calls. I didn't reach out either. For once, I let the silence sit where it belonged. But it didn't end there. Because just when I thought the drama had quieted down, I got a message from Eric. And what he wrote. It took everything in me not to drive over and scream at him face to face. It was a Sunday morning. Quiet. Cold. The kind of morning where you just want to stay in bed, drink your coffee slow, and pretend the world doesn't exist. I was scrolling aimlessly through my phone when I saw it, a message from Eric. Just his name on my screen made my chest tighten. I hadn't heard from him in months. The last time we spoke, he was already spiraling, drunk on some excuse, blaming the world for the choices he kept making. I hesitated before opening it. Some foolish part of me hoped maybe, just maybe, he was going to apologize. Or explain. Or thank me for all the times I'd been there when no one else would. But that hope was crushed the second I read the first line. Wow. So you've really turned your back on your own family, huh? No hello. No context. Just straight to the accusation. The rest of the message was a mess of rage, self-pity, and delusion. You think you're better than everyone now? Just because you've got a job and an apartment doesn't mean you're too good to help out when things get hard. Mom and Dad are worried sick. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Since you're too busy playing the victim. The kids needed you. And you ghosted. I hope you feel great about that. I sat there, reading it again and again, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. There was no accountability. Not a single word about how he left his own children without warning. No recognition of the burden he created, not just for Mom and Dad, but for me. I wasn't angry that he needed help. I was angry that he expected it, that he felt entitled to it, that somehow, in his twisted logic, I was the problem for finally saying no. What stunned me most was the sheer audacity of it, as if all the years I'd bailed him out, loaned him money, defended him to our parents, and picked up the pieces after his failures never happened. In his eyes, I was either useful or I was the enemy. There was no middle ground. I didn't reply. I stared at my screen for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard, thinking of all the things I wanted to say. I wanted to remind him of the night I stayed with him in the hospital when he overdosed. I wanted to bring up the time I took care of his kids when he disappeared for 3 days. I wanted to ask him if he even remembered that I once missed my own promotion meeting to drive him to rehab. But what would it matter? People like Eric don't remember what you did for them. They only remember the one time you didn't. So instead of replying, I blocked him. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Not proud. Not smug. Just quietly, painfully free. But that feeling didn't last long. Because a few days later, something happened that would drag me right back into the mess I was trying to escape. This time, not because of guilt, but because of truth. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those dusky, in-between hours where the light outside is fading, but the city is still humming. I was sitting on my couch, lost in a rare moment of peace, when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years. Melissa. Eric's ex. The mother of his kids. I froze. We'd never been close, but we'd had polite exchanges at family events, back when Eric still pretended to be stable, back when my parents acted like she was a phase and not the woman raising their grandchildren. I hadn't spoken to her since the breakup, since Eric disappeared that time for nearly a month and came back acting like nothing had happened. Her message was brief. I know you're not talking to your parents or Eric right now, but I thought you should see this. You deserve to know. Attached was a scanned letter. No, a report. A court document. Custody filing. Filed by Melissa. In it, she detailed Eric's pattern of substance abuse, neglect, abandonment, and emotional instability. She documented years of him coming and going, disappearing for weeks, sometimes months, leaving the kids with whoever would take them, including my parents. She'd filed for sole custody. And her case was airtight. I didn't know what stunned me more, that she had the courage to finally do it, or that in the filing, she'd included several references to me, to how I had once taken the children to the doctor, paid for groceries when Eric vanished, covered rent once when she was afraid they'd be evicted. Me, the invisible son. I was in that report more than my own parents were. I reached out to her immediately. We ended up talking on the phone for over an hour. She was tired. Not angry, just exhausted. I know they blamed you, she said softly. I know they always made you the backup plan. But I want you to know, the kids remember. They still ask about you. That broke something in me. All this time, I've been painted as the selfish one, the cold one. But the kids? The ones Eric left behind again and again? They remembered who was there when it counted. I couldn't fix the past. I couldn't change my parents. But I could choose what came next. I told Melissa I'd help however I could, not for Eric. Not for my parents. But for the kids. Because they deserved better than the cycle they were born into. But before I could even begin to help, my mother found out. And she did something that truly shocked me. Something cruel. Something final. It was barely 2 days after I spoke with Melissa when I got the call from my mother. I should have let it go to voicemail. But curiosity, or maybe some last flicker of hope that she'd say something different this time, made me answer. Her tone was clipped. Cold. Not a trace of the motherly warmth she reserved for Eric. Only frost. So you're working with her now, she said without a greeting. Just like that. No hello. No, how are you? Just straight into accusation. I didn't know you'd sunk so low that you'd help a woman destroy your brother's life. I bit my tongue to stop the surge of emotion boiling inside me. I wasn't going to be baited. Not this time. She's protecting her children, I said. Something you should have done a long time ago. That's when the mask dropped. You are no longer part of this family, she said sharply. You've made your choice. You turned your back on your blood. And then, as if she had been holding on to it, waiting for a moment to wound me. We're changing the will. You will not receive a single thing. Don't come to the house. Don't call. Don't show up at family gatherings. You're done. Silence. It rang louder than her words. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I cared about the money, not really. But because in that moment, she didn't just cut me out of a document. She cut me out of her life. I wasn't angry. Not even hurt. I was numb. But somewhere deep beneath that numbness, I felt relief. Finally, the game was over. Finally, I didn't have to keep proving my worth. Finally, I could stop trying to earn love that had never been unconditional. I sat with the pain that night. Didn't try to drown it out. Didn't call anyone. Just sat with it. And then, the next morning, I made a decision. I filed a statement in Melissa's custody case, a formal declaration of the events I had witnessed. I offered to testify if needed. I connected her with a friend of mine, a lawyer who specialized in family law. I wasn't doing it to get back at anyone. I was doing it because someone needed to break the cycle. And if that someone had to be me, the forgotten son, the discarded brother, then so be it. Weeks passed. I didn't hear from my parents again. Not even a text. But one night, I got a message from Melissa. A photo. The kids, Eric's kids, were smiling. They were at a small park, holding ice cream cones, messy and wild and happy. She wrote, "They miss you. When you're ready, they'd love to see you again." And that's when I cried. Not for what I lost, but for what I might still be able to protect.